And finally, we have the Vagabond. Now, the Vagabond plays significantly different from the other three factions. First of all, they only have one warrior token. They can move into the woods, not just the clearings, and they do everything with items, as you can see here. So we've talked a little bit about crafting items. There are a limited number of items available to craft in the game. Once they've been crafted, on the other player boards, they go into the little box in the corner of your player board. The Vagabond is powered by those items, so the player behind the Vagabond is incentivized to give you cards to get those items and then use them to power up what they can do. Again, same victory conditions same victory points in terms of damaging tokens and buildings, but also by aiding other factions. So they can increase their faction with other players, so they have markers for that. And as they increase that, they score victory points for increasing levels, and when they get to the top level of Allied, continual or subsequent aid actions will gain them +2 victory points. It's worth noting here that in order to move, for example, the Eagles from indifferent to level 1, or to get that 1 victory point, you take the aid action 1 time in 1 turn. But to get from here to here requires taking the aid action 2 times in 1 turn to get to there, and then you'll get those 2 victory points, and again 3 times in 1 turn will get them to here. So there we go. If you damage, attack or fight with any of these factions, you will go to hostile, and then you'll get an additional bonus point for every hostile piece removed in battle, including warriors, which are not normally worth a point. Now they're worth a point. So there we go. So that's how their victory points work. They are very much just playing off of the other players, and so on and so forth. Because they are just by themselves, they have a couple special rules. Nimble, they don't have to rule the source or destination clearing when they move, and their pawn doesn't count as a warrior and cannot be removed. So their pawn is always on the map. Their health and their number of warriors in the clearing for dealing damage is all done, again, through the items. You do get an archetype, so the thief is the starting archetype that you pick normally, and that determines your starting actions as well as a special action that you have, and there are other choices you can make as well on that. So the other special thing the Vagabond does is the Vagabond has quest cards, and this is fairly straightforward. You exhaust the things necessary. So for example, you exhaust your teapot and your boot in a fox clearing, and you'll be able to pick one of these 2 rewards. You can get 1 victory point for every fox quest you've completed, or draw 2 cards. And there's multiples of those as you run through your quests, and you can cycle that. So let's talk a little bit about items. Items can be ready to go, they can be exhausted, or they can be damaged, and when they are damaged, they're not cannot be used. To repair them, you have to go into the woods or use your hammer, which the thief does not start with. And so we'll talk through that in the way the game plays. Swords are basically your warriors for determining damage. And then when you take damage, you just damage one of your items. But undamaged swords, exhausted or not, are how you determine how many hits you can deal in a combat. So let's walk through the turn and see if all that kind of makes sense in context. So again, everybody starts with Birdsong. In this case, you get to refresh 3 items, and every T you have will refresh 2 more. So that's pretty slick. You can go ahead and get items back for your next turn. And then you may slip. And a slip is a free move, and it includes moving to an adjacent clearing or forest. So I'm going to move the camera here. I apologize for the jittery. But the Vagabond can move into the woods on their turn, and on a subsequent move can come back out. And a slip can also be just used to go from clearing to clearing. So while we're, I'll come back to that. So back at the player board. Sorry, the Vagabond is, as I said, one of the more complex, if not the most complex faction. So during daylight, you can do things, but it requires items to do it. So exhausting a boot will let you move, but not into a forest. Exhausting a sword will let you battle, and the max hits equals undamaged, not unexhausted, undamaged swords. You can explore, and that's where we're going to come right back to the board here. So if you see this ruin here, you exhaust a torch to explore that ruin, and underneath it, and there are 4 of these on the board, is an item. And you get that item, you also get a victory point, but even more so, now you've freed up that space for the cat or the Eyrie, or even potentially the woodland to build there, which is pretty slick. So that's nice. And again, it's that interaction between the Vagabond and the other characters that is fairly fascinating, I think. Okay, so we talked about Explore. Aid, we talked about. Again, it's you give a card matching your clearing to a player that's present in that clearing, and in exchange you get an item. So you get an item, they get a card to recover the cost of having to craft the card in the first place. And if you do it enough times to advance a level, you'll gain victory points requisite to that level gain. You can exhaust the items that are necessary to claim a quest, and then you can draw back up to replace that. So that's always cool. You can work through there. And then you can strike, which is basically an ambush. If you have a crossbow, you'll notice, again, the thief doesn't start with one, but it allows you to remove a piece in your clearing. You must start with warriors. You can't just use this to farm victory points by killing tokens and buildings. But if there are no warriors, hey, have at it and grab your victory points while you can. Lastly, you can repair or craft. And this is pretty interesting here. When you are crafting, your hammers all match the clearing you're in. So here's your crafting token, but the suit of it is wherever you're currently standing. So if I'm standing in a fox clearing and I have 3 hammers, or in this case 1 hammer, I have 1 fox worth of craft. And there we go. So that walks us through. You've got all these things here. You've got your satchel, and you've got teapots and coin stacks and bags. So when we get into evening, we're doing our upkeep just like everybody else. If you are in the forest, you can repair all your items. So you don't have to do this onesie twosie thing. You just spend your entire turn in the forest, because if you slipped at the beginning of your turn, you can't do any of these because you're not in a clearing to do any of it. So there you go. So give up your turn, you can repair everything. The second thing is, obviously, you draw a card. Instead of having to reveal those extra card draw options, you get more coin stacks, and for every coin stack you have, you can get an additional card draw. And these coin stacks, again, can be crafted by the other players, and then you can trade for them through the aid action. You discard down to 5, again, everybody does, and then your satchel is limited to 6 items as well, but for the bags that you can get your hands on, you're going to get an additional 2 items in your satchel, or you can hold an additional 2 items in your satchel. So that's pretty much that. There is one other twist that comes with the Vagabond, and bear with me one second. So when you're dealing with the Vagabond and a dominance card, and I showed you the ones for the suited dominance cards, this is the bird dominance card. And so this one is ruling opposite corners. In every case, the dominance cards are about ruling territory in the forest in a challenging way. And the Vagabond can play this card differently. When the Vagabond plays the card, they pick the lowest scoring faction in the game. They take their victory track marker off the victory track and put it on the player board of that faction, and now they will share the victory if that faction wins. So they basically have allied with the currently losing faction. While we're talking about it for dominance cards, just a couple more pieces here. One, dominance cards can't be played until you are past 10 victory points. And you'll notice here it says, if spent for suit, make available. So if you cash in a dominance card like you would any other card to power some other action, it doesn't get in the discard pile. It goes next to it, and another player can swap out for a card of the same suit so they can get their hands on the dominance card. Of course, it's done highly visibly, but that's how that works. So with that, I think I'm all done explaining Root. So all that's left is to post these things. So have a great day. Bye.